How can you tell whether you're an INFJ or an INFP? What's the difference between the two? Both of those questions will be answered on today's show. One major difference between the INFJ and INFP personality types is what's called their dominant function, or their main mindset through which they see the world and interact with those around them. And this mindset is the one that drives the personality. It's the most powerful and the one that affects what they think and do the most. So for an INFP, that mindset is known as introverted feeling. And introverted feeling is deeply concerned with personal integrity. People with introverted feeling as their main mindset want to be authentic and true to themselves. And INFPs in particular want to make something that expresses their own authenticity and uniqueness and originality while also helping other people. INFPs are driven to do that which is personally meaningful. They have a really hard time working and complying with someone else's standards to advance someone else's goal. Not that they can't do that, but they really have to believe in what they're doing. And ideally, they like to have autonomy and control of themselves so that they can invest in what they care about deeply. And this is kind of tricky because outwardly, INFPs appear open-minded and very flexible. In contrast, INFJs lead with a dominant function or primary mindset called introverted intuition. And this introverted intuition thirsts for knowledge, for a deep understanding of why things work the way they do. INFJs are at heart learners, and they love to gather insights, and they use those insights into people and the way the world works to help others. If you were to see an INFJ out on the street, you'd probably see someone dressed more formally and moving with purpose, because most of the time they're going to accomplish something and get something done. They're not just kind of wandering around without a reason for doing so. A big difference between the way the INFJ and INFP's main mindset manifests itself is in language. So if you get the chance to listen to an INFJ, you will notice that their language is generally pretty complicated and complex. And this is because they tend to be deep and there are a lot of thoughts and feelings and ideas working through their head all at once. So they have a hard time expressing them clearly, and it's kind of hard to follow. INFJs are much better writers and better expressing themselves generally through writing than they are through verbal communication. INFPs, in contrast, tend to be soft-spoken and to like to express themselves with what they say. They also sometimes come across as thinkers just because of the way their minds are made up and the rest of the personality plays out. Another thing you might notice about them is when they're talking, rather than coming right out and saying what they want to do, they might hint or suggest at what they're really after or what they desire to do. So rather than just saying, I want to go to the movies, they might say something like, would you be interested in going to see that new movie sometime? Or what would you think about that new movie? Or do you want to go down and check out that art venue? Or whatever that particular INFP might be interested in, he or she isn't going to come right out and say it. So interestingly, you can see the way the mindset manifests itself just through things like dress and communication, because it so powerfully affects the rest of the personality. So clearly, one big difference between the INFJ and INFP personality types is what's important to them. To the INFP, it's primarily self-expression and authenticity and being true to himself or herself, whereas with the INFJ, it's understanding the world and the way the world works. And tied to that is the second difference, which has to do with who each of the personality types is trying to please. So let's break this down a little bit. Both personality types are feelers, just like they're both intuitives. And as feelers, they generally want to help people and they are seeking interpersonal harmony. That's the case with almost every feeler and definitely with NF types. But with the INFP, deep down inside, since he or she is an introverted feeler, the goal ultimately is to do something that's in alignment with their true selves. So they want to be authentic and they really want to be invested in the kinds of relationships and projects and creative ventures that they take on. So again, pleasing self. In contrast, INFJs seek to please others. Now, ultimately they want to do something that they care about deeply, but they try to maintain external harmony. So that's another way you could put it too. INFPs want to have inner harmony, whereas INFJs are trying to please others and maintain external harmony. So they tend to be really tuned in to social norms and what's expected of them and how other people are feeling. And they really do a great job of picking up on other people's emotions. And that's one of the big indicators of an INFJ. And I'd say an INFP would be pretty good at this, but an INFJ has an uncanny ability to pick up on how other people are thinking and feeling, even if other people are trying to hide it most times, or if they don't come out and say it. Now, they're not necessarily mind readers. There's a lot out there about that. And some INFJs are more perceptive than others, but in general, they can pick up what's going on and they take in, little clues like facial expressions and tone of voice, body language, and they pick this up, almost at an imperceptible level in their mind, pieces it together like a puzzle and comes away with an impression about what someone is probably thinking or feeling. So usually they can do this with uncanny accuracy. And again, they use this to maintain the social harmony, and their goal is to please others. They want others to be happy first. And sometimes this means that they're chameleons in nature, meaning they try to fit in and be someone that might not be themselves because they want to maintain outward harmony. Now that we've taken a look at how feeling plays out in each of the personality types, let's talk about intuition, starting with the INFJ. So INFJs are people who use introverted intuition. And as I mentioned before, they love to go deep. They love to learn. They're very creative and they tend to brainstorm with themselves. So introverted intuition does like new ideas, but again, a lot of the work it does happens in the mind. And when it's piecing information that is collected together, it happens subconsciously. The fruit of this subconscious mental work is usually impressions or aha moments or flashes of insight that come after a lot of research or a lot of observation. So if you're an INFJ, for example, you might be reading a bunch of articles on a certain subject that you're interested in or watching some movies, and then you've been puzzling over this in a day later, or even a couple hours, or maybe a couple of days later, you're in the shower when all of a sudden, boom, it hits you. You have that idea, you have that flash of insight, and you get it. You put all the dots together and you understand it, or you have that new idea or vision and you know how things are probably going to play out. That's kind of how introverted intuition works. And again, it tends to like to go deep. So it does, like all intuitives, INFJs do like variety, but it tends to be deeper and more focused. In contrast, INFPs tend to like a lot of variety and they take in a lot of ideas. So they might have a ton of projects out on the table, but they might not execute all of them. For them, the fun is brainstorming. So whereas introverted intuition goes deep, extroverted intuition multiplies ideas. It is great at brainstorming, and unlike introverted intuition, which brainstorms internally, since it's an introverted mindset, extroverted intuition tends to work well brainstorming aloud with other people, and that just fuels the fire, and it's great at coming up with new ideas, and again, just putting more and more out on the table. So the extroverted intuitives tend to love new ideas and the greatest new thing and something exciting. Change is really big for INFPs, at least a lot more than it is for INFJs, but both types do like change. So that's just a little bit of the difference between introverted intuition and extroverted intuition. And again, just to clarify, INFPs use extroverted intuition, whereas INFJs use introverted intuition. Finally, other than looking at what's most important to each type, a huge and very helpful way to tell the difference between personality types is to look at what each type's greatest struggle is. And I got this idea from AJ Drenth, who wrote a great book called My True Type. So if you haven't checked it out, I'd highly recommend that book. But in that book, he says that you can tell the difference between personality types, particularly like the INFP and the INFJ, by looking at what their greatest struggles are. So just a little bit of background. Every personality type has 4 main mindsets, which are often called a functional stack or functional hierarchy. And for the INFP, their functional stack consists of introverted feeling, extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, and extroverted thinking. So in that hierarchy or that order, there is power. Like the first one I mentioned at the beginning of this show is for an INFP, introverted feeling. But the last one for an INFP is extroverted thinking. So introverted feeling is going to be really strong in the personality type, and extroverted thinking is going to be a bit of an Achilles heel. It's going to be a big weakness. So for INFPs, it can be hard to execute on projects. It can be hard to figure out quantities and to determine amounts of time that things are going to take. And generally just to be a manager of people and things is very tiring for INFPs. And that's extroverted thinking again. And that would be the weakness. By contrast, for INFJs, their functional hierarchy or their stack of mindsets is the following. It starts with introverted intuition and then moves to extroverted feeling, then introverted thinking, and finally extroverted sensing. So again, for an INFJ, introverted intuition is the strongest, most well-developed mindset, and extroverted sensing excels at being in the moment. It's acutely aware of all that's happening at face value in terms of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So it's really tuned into the moment and the environment. So a lot of performers, either athletes or musicians, have some level of extroverted sensing in their functional stack. They're really good at playing off the crowd, and actually being part of that moment amplifies their performance, and they're even better. They get even more pumped up by the crowd. But most of the time, INFJs have trouble being in the moment. They would rather be drifting off and thinking about the future, possibilities, theory, and ideas, or they might be analyzing a conversation and all of the faux pas that they happen to commit. So I can give you an example of this one really quick. I mentioned this before, but when I was with my wife on the porch one night, I was trying to work on being in the moment. I'm very poor at this because I'm an INFJ, but we were sitting there eating a brownie, and I decided that I was going to focus on the taste of that brownie and really enjoy the moment. And I started thinking about the taste and what it tasted like, and that reminded me about the way extroverted sensing plays out in other personality types, which launched me into theory and functional hierarchies and this stuff that I love to talk about. And my wife just shook her head. She couldn't handle it. And there again, I failed to be in the moment. So I really have to kick myself to make sure I focus on being in the moment. And it feels like work, honestly, to be in the moment because it's not my gift. So all that to say, a big way to tell the difference between whether you're an INFP or an INFJ is to ask yourself, what's hardest for me? Is it that extroverted thinking, managing others, managing projects, just being able to calculate times and amounts and thinking in a logical manner, expressing myself directly, not coming across, not having to suggest things, but saying exactly what you want? Or is your biggest struggle being in the moment? Do you have trouble engaging where you are, or does your mind tend to drift off into the future and to think about theory or words or ideas or even, design and patterns, whatever you are most excited about as an INFJ, if that's what you are. So if you've ever wondered if you're an INFP or an INFJ, definitely think about this point because it can really help you tell the difference between the two. If you'd like some further reading to help you clarify whether or not you're an INFJ or an INFP, then I'd encourage you to grab a free copy of my recent ebook, the INFJ Personality Guide. And you can grab a copy of this particular guide, which is going to delve into the 4 INFJ preferences and the 4 mindsets that make up the personality type, and then some of the challenges and ways to overcome those common INFJ challenges. You can grab a hold of this guide by texting the letters INFJ to the number 444999, or you can just visit the link ispeakpeople.com/INFJ-personality-guide and grab an absolutely free complimentary copy. Thank you so much for watching today's show. I hope that you found it helpful. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, make sure to do that now because I'm producing new shows every week to help INFJs just like you. And again, if you haven't grabbed your copy of the INFJ Personality Guide, take a moment to do that and just text the letters INFJ to 444999, or you can click on the link that I'll post in the description below this video. See you next time.